That's what I really like about the directness of the message of Advaita Vedanta or Zen or Chan or whatever we want to, wherever we want to take that message from non-duality from. The directness is not free as the self, but free from the self. Yeah. Because we know from the 12 steps in AA and the big book that really it's the self, the identity is the individual separate thing, and the manifestations of that self, which are the root of what is causing the addictive behavior. Because it's those manifestations of self which makes things very uncomfortable, then we want to get out of that. Now, seemingly we can't get out of it, primarily, absolutely, because we're not in it in the first place. You've never been in self. That is the dreaming, but it seems like we're in it, and then we want to get out of it, but we can't get out of it because we're not in it. For first of all, but the second thing is we can't get out of it because we're living as it. Yeah, so there's a manifestations of self, anger, resentment. Yeah, is the biggest one, of course, in recovery. Resentment. So if we're living as the thing that's holding resentment, how are we going to get out of that as it? Because we're identified as it. So we can't. So we turn to drugs, alcohol, sex, gambling, whatever you want to do. Yeah. In my case, in my experience, it's to try to black out that self, that self, and that movement. So this is why I love the 12 steps and 12-step recovery, because 12-step recovery divides us. It gives us space. Divide isn't the right word, but it gives us space from that self and the manifestations of self by putting trust in a higher power, by moving the faith from that finite mental movement, the mental happening, to a higher power. And in doing that, we get some space from the movements and the manifestations of self. So the higher power does for me what I couldn't do for myself. It gives me space from the movement that I was living as. Because really, what the non duality shows us is that we're living as the problem. That's the root of what's going on. Is that if I'm living as the mental system, and the mental system is what's causing all the problems, I'm living as the problem. You see? We end up living as the problem. And then what do we try to do? We try to change the problem. We try to change the mental movement and the way that the mental is set up. So that is trying to get free as self. As living as the body and the mind, I'm going to modify the body and the mind, essentially. Yes, that is the free as self. But in Advaita Vedanta Zen, we don't look to get free as self. We get free from self. Because I can only modify the mind and the body so much. Yeah. They're still going to live dualistically all the time. So I can get a little bit of relief in the body and the mind. Obviously the mind can be modified. The body can help get relaxed. The lot we can do, we can alter a lot of things. But when it comes to real relief, lasting relief, yeah, it's disentangling from the mental and the physical. Not as it, yeah, but getting free from it. Mm. Because we obviously can change the mind and the body a lot. We can. But we're not going to get free of duality because it's the system. That's the system that's the pay grade that the head is under. So if we're living as the head, yeah, as that separate self, we're living as the problem. We're living as the system which is creating the problems. It's creating the tension in the body. It's creating the mental tension. It's creating the pushing and pulling of I have to get out of this situation. I have to get into this mental situation. Yeah. because the head is never really here. It's always past, or it's always in the future, or projecting to the future. You are always here, presence. And the thinking also, which is reaching to past and future, is happening here. But when you're getting pulled by it, it seems like you're never here. You're always here. You can't not be here. Where are you gonna go? You know? Yeah, like that. You can't go anywhere. It's just that the self is seeming to pull us back and forth. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. If you're living as the self, as the mental movement, you're living as the problem, as the thing that's causing you problems, rather than trying to alter that in an ultimate way. Let's say rather than trying to stop the thinking, rather than trying to end duality as a dualistic system, see that you're not the head, that you're not the movement of the mental. Yeah? And that would disentangle you from the body as well. Because when there's a thought happening, when there's thought movement happening, if there's a claiming, so the head is talking to J as J, let's say, yeah? The head is talking to J as J. What is J pictured as is a body. Is a body. You see that you're not the mental movement and you disentangle from the body. And it's very important to disentangle from the body in that way. Because otherwise, I know this from studying with Judith Blackstone, is this amazing embodiment teacher and non-dual teacher in New York. But we just let go from the surface of ourselves, and the realization becomes another idea. And I can tell you from experience, realization being an idea is a super claustrophobic, uncomfortable place to be. Yeah, it's like, that's not a great place to be. So when we're looking for ultimate relief, we're looking to get free, yeah, from the problem, not as the problem. And it's good to obviously remind that the mental movement is not. You hear this sometimes. I hear people say the head is lying to me. The head is not lying. The head is telling its own story. Yeah, and it's based on its past imprints. Is how it's perceiving the now and projecting the future. The head is telling a story. The story is just a happening. It's not lying to you because it's telling what it thinks is honestly happening. So the head is not lying to you. The head is doing exactly what the head is doing. The head has information from the past. It's taking the current experience and it's trying to understand that current experience with the information that it has from the past, and then it's projecting an idea of the future. It's not lying. It's doing what it can do. But the value, there's nothing wrong with it, but the value in it is seeing that it's a story. Because that story, for many of us, creates massive discomfort right now. And it's causing massive discomfort right now based on information of the past. It's massive discomfort right now about things that aren't actually happening for the most part. So you see, that's the value of seeing that it's a story. Rather than trying to modify that story to some beautiful star-like state, see that you're not the story and you're free from the story. Look where the story is rooted. The story is rooted in the perception of an I. Where is the I? Where does that arise from? Then you'll see that the I is another perception. It's another thought. That there is no space or place where I sits. It's another movement. Yeah? So let it move. we need... A lot of the struggling comes from we solidify the movement and then try to change the movement as it when we're not it. You see? We need to stop living as the problem. See that you're not the mental happening. And let the mental happening unfold as it may. And I think what you'll experience, if you experience the way I've experienced it, is that the mental happening changes drastically when I'm not living as it, because I'm not feeding the mental happening. It's just happening. So I see the story as a story. A judgment is just a judgment. It doesn't become this long drawn out thing because I'm putting me in it. A thought doesn't become a depression down the road, 15 minutes down the road. And then I'm not living as depression. Because if I'm living as depression, then I'm going to get living as severe depression. And then all of a sudden, there I'm tumbling into a relapse idea. Well, drinking would help. I'm worthless, whatever. I'm a piece of shit. And now I feel like drinking. You see? It's because we end up living as the problem initially. That's the first hit. We put our faith back in the finite rather than the infinite. Because we can modify the mental system, as we know. You can change a lot of things in the mental system, but you're not going to get that hit or that drop of relief that we're talking about here as it. And this is what happens to meditators a lot. They end up meditating, but we don't see that we're identified as what is meditating. Yeah, so it's like we get calm, we get really chilled out, but there's still a hook. There's still a discomfort. And if you get that mind settled down, you get that minute or 5 minutes of stillness when you're sitting. And then as soon as you get off the cushion, you're still identified as the mental system and you're off again. And then there's the pain, let's say, of not being able to maintain the meditative state in your day-to-day life. It's because the mental system is doing its happenings. Yeah. And it's doing what it's doing. It's telling its story. Wonderful. It's great. But it's not you. It's a story. And if we're living as the story, then we're living as the problem. It's the beautiful thing about Advaita Vedanta. You have a body and mind, but you're not the body and mind. It's very direct. Very direct. It's like the 12-step program where it's very simple. It doesn't mean it's easy, but it's very simple. Yeah. And it's not like the switch is going to, well, maybe the switch will turn instantly out of nowhere and you're free. You get disentangled from it and it stays disentangled. Yeah. In my experience, that's not what it's been though. It's meditation is included, but we have to come at meditation clearly and see that what meditation is for what I'm not. Otherwise, if I'm sitting down and I'm claiming to be the meditator and the one doing all of it, I'm still tied to the problem that I'm trying to get free from by meditating. You see? That's amazing. So when we're doing spiritual practices, we need to realize that the spiritual practices are not for what we are, but for what we're not. To settle down the movements, the chatter of what we're not, so that we can sit back into what we are. And then the pendulum starts to swing in our day-to-day lives. It goes more over to that. Yeah. And then the beauty comes in is when when there's a great knowing, not a knower, but a knowing that you're not the mental, that you're not the self. Then you can really start to work with the self. Then you can really examine the physical body, tension in the physical body, how it's tied to the mental system, why the mental holdings are bringing tension into the body. See, it's like you go in the back door of the self, and by doing that, life as a self, as a body and mind, becomes much more comfortable. Start as what you are, and then work towards healing what you're not. Because if you're trying to heal what you're not, if you're trying to heal the body and the mind as the body and the mind, you're getting in your own way by being entangled with it. You're still living as the problem. You see? And you're not going to be able to unhook from that. At least in my experience and from all the teachers that I've studied with and read. You know? That's another thing. I mean, we've talked about this before, but it's like all of the reading and the studying. Who is doing that? Yeah? It's the mental system. It's the mental system. In a way, all of the knowledge that we gain by reading and studying and all these things is tying us more so to being the knower, which is the same thing as the problem. It's the same root, same base. Yeah. So it's important, I think, to root in that saying of getting free from self, not as self. We stop trying to change the mental process so much and just see that you're not the mental process, and you stop living as the problem. And then we can start there. We can start there from what we are to look at then the mental system. Yeah. Which inherently isn't a problem. It's just a story that's happening. And it's fine. But it is a story, and we need to see that it's a story. Because otherwise we're living as a story, which is not actually happening. And for many of us, that story, if there's traumatic events or whatever's happened in life, can make life uncomfortable right now. In my experience, we don't get relief as the story. You get relief from the story, from the character. Yeah. And then the character can live a lot freer, a lot more buoyant.